Bhavik, let me know when you want to get started. Okay, I think we should get started now. Once again, sorry for yesterday. I had a personal emergency, so I had to attend that. So it was a last minute call, and I had to call in and inform Collabor about that. All right. So let's get started today. Let's get started our discussion with. Today we are going to look at something called as RDS, right? RDS is a truly till now what we have been looking are basically infrastructure as a service, right? So we were setting up infrastructure and then we're creating servers and all of this stuff. Auto scaling, load balancing, we were looking at all of those things, right? In those cases, you are going to own everything other than the hardware, all the software components, you are going to own it. You're going to do all the required configuration. But with RDS, it is a platform as a service solution from Amazon, right? So in RDS, what's going to happen is you can provision a database, right? Say if I'm a small organization, right? I have my application servers and web servers and all of those servers. All I need is a database server to load data, right? Normally, what would I do? I would go ahead, install a new server, then install database, then configure it, then create tables and all of that stuff, right? But with RDS, what you're going to do is you're not going to install the operating system. You're not going to install the database software, right? So Amazon is going to install the operating system for you as well as the database on top of it, right? All you're going to do is you're going to use the database to store your data, okay? And all the required other things like updation of the database, backups of the database, all of this stuff be taken care by AWS. You don't have to worry about it, right? The only thing that you have to be worried about is storing your data and retrieving your data, right? So Amazon is not going to create the table for you. What they're going to give you a platform in the sense a database platform, right? After that platform is provided to you, it's up to you to define databases, because Amazon cannot know what databases, what tables a customer will require, right? So what Amazon gives you is a pre-built, pre-baked operating system with database installed on top of it, so that you can straight away use that solution and store your database, store your data, right? So let's look at the product page, and I'll again say, guys, read the product pages of all the products that you're working on. It has lots of information, features, FAQs. These all things will really help you clear the certification exam also. If you're planning to go for the certification exam, the one place where you have to be is on the AWS site. It has loads of information for you to clear the certification exam, right? All right, so let's look at RDS, right? I'm saying Amazon is going to provide you a database, right? But what database? Is it a MySQL database? Is it a PostgreSQL database, or a Microsoft SQL server, or an Oracle database server, right? There are many kinds of databases out there in the market. There is IBM DB2, right? If you guys have heard about these database softwares, there are many. But what Amazon supports on their platform is these, right? What Amazon supports is these. They support all of these database engines, okay? They support Amazon Aurora, which is a new database engine coming up from Amazon itself, right? So this can work only on AWS platform. Then these are the commercially available databases, right? So Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, then you have PostgreSQL, then you have MySQL and MariaDB, right? So these are all the available databases out there in the market. So if you want to have a database server, first you should decide which platform you want, right? What type of database engine that you are looking at. Say I prefer Oracle database, right? So then I'm going to provision an Oracle database. Maybe another customer may need a MySQL database, so they're going to provision a MySQL database. So anybody needing one of these platforms can use, right? So by default, AWS has all of this support, right? So for example, MySQL, right? Today we are going to pretty much look at MySQL, but if you guys are familiar with any of the other database services like Oracle or Microsoft SQL, you can definitely go ahead and create the database and create the tables and do all the database work that you want to do, right? So why should you go for RDS, right? Why should you go for RDS? What we can do is even we can take a EC2 instance and install MySQL software on top of it, right? But why? Why do someone has to go for RDS? The primary reason is you don't have to maintain much stuff in there. All you have to do is you have to start loading the data, right? You don't have to take the headaches of maintaining a database, right? Amazon is going to do that for you. As an end customer, you can start pumping the data into the database, right? All right, so I would highly recommend you guys to visit this page, and there is a video here, a small approximately 3 minutes of video. You can have a look at it. It will give you a primary understanding or a basic understanding of what an RDS database is, and then these are all the people who are using RDS solution. So the benefits: easy to administer. So you have your database and you can control it, right? Scalable. So by default, what Amazon says is the upper limit of the database is approximately 6 TB or something like that, right? And it is and we are going to we are going to talk about something called as multi-AZ database, right? Now we are going to talk about something called as multi-AZ database. So with multi-AZ deployments, what's going to happen is with multi-AZ deployments, right? What's going to happen is, say, as I have explained you guys, there are availability zones, regions, and all of this, right? So if I'm going to go for a multi-AZ deployment, right? Multiple availability zone deployment, right? So for example, if this is one of my availability zone, right, and I have another availability zone, if I'm going to go for a multi-AZ deployment, what's going to happen is one of my database server, one of my RDS instance will be here, and there will be a second RDS instance here, right? At any given point of time, say you have your application servers here, say you have your application servers here, and they have to talk to the database. So what they're going to do is, at any given point of time, they're going to talk to only this server, but there will also be a secondary server for your primary database, right? This will be acting as a backup. If something wrong happens with this server, or if something happens with this availability zone itself, then what Amazon does is Amazon automatically switches over the address of this database server to this server, right? So you don't have to make any changes in your application. It will be instantaneous. It will be online. You will not even feel the difference, right? And talking about that, let's look at the architecture diagram again that we looked at a couple of days back, right? So this architecture diagram has lots of information for you guys if you look at that. Right, this one we are talking about, right? If you look at this one, till now what we have talked about was the elastic load balancers, right, and the EC2 instances, and auto scaling we talked about. So this part we have talked about, right? And we also talked about something called as a S3 bucket also, right? Later on we are going to talk about DNS and this one, right? CDN and all of this stuff we are going to talk about them later on. But for now, today what we are going to look at is this part, RDS. So if you look at this architecture diagram, it is a typical web application hosting architecture diagram, right? The web application hosting has 3 layers basically: web service, application service, database service, right? So what's going to happen is your web servers are going to talk to your web servers are going to talk to your application servers. In turn, application service will talk to the RDS. But if you look at here, this RDS has a multi-AZ deployment, and if you look at this, these application servers are not actually talking to this RDS instance, right? So there will be a primary RDS instance and there will be a standby RDS instance, right? So whenever some data has to be written or retrieved, right? Some data has to be stored or to be retrieved. As long as this server is up, these application servers keep talking to this database server. Just in case if something wrong happens with this availability zone or with this server, Amazon automatically flips over this network connection from here to here, right? As the data is already synchronously replicated. So you see a synchronous replication here. So what does that mean is every record that you store here will be replicated to here, right? Every record that you're going to store here will be replicated to here. That will be synchronous. So as soon as something wrong happens here, the switch will be instantaneous from here to here, and there will be no data loss, right? So that has been taken care. The same thing if you have to implement it, it's a big thing, right? The same thing if you want to implement it, it's a big thing. So that is one of the other reason why you should go for RDS. And just a point here, if you're going to go for a multi-AZ deployment, right? If you're not going for there are 2 types of deployment basically: a multi-AZ deployment and a single RDS instance. And if you're going to have a single RDS instance, there will be only one database server, and that goes wrong, your database server is out and your application will be down. If you don't want to have that, you can go for multi-AZ deployment. But with multi-AZ deployment, what's going to happen is, so if you're paying $5 for it, then this one will also add up another $5. So the total will be $10, right? The cost will double, but you're going to get more durability, Okay, that's a trade-off. That's a trade-off that you have to decide whether you want it or not. Okay, all right. So let's look at that. Available and durable, fast. RDS is fast, so we're going to look at the types of RDS instances that you can have, right? And it is secure. RDS is cheap. That's what they say, right? So all of these are some of the benefits of RDS instances. And then if you look at the product details, right? Uh, Easy to use, low basic. The main fundamental reason why you should go for RDS is lower administrative burden. You don't have to worry much about your database. Most of the thing is taken care by AWS. All you have to do is you have to store the data. You have to use the database and store the data, right? And you get very good metrics, right? As soon as if you look at if you look at our CloudWatch now, right? Let's look at the CloudWatch. Let's look at the CloudWatch. Right now, we don't see any metrics for RDS, right? All the metrics that I have are for SA and SNS, right? But I don't have any metrics for RDS. As soon as I launch my RDS instances, you're going to see metrics coming up for RDS, right? So they have some good metrics for RDS. You can take advantage of that. Automatic software patching, right? So if you're going to maintain the database server, whenever there is somebody has raised a hand. Let's take the question. I'll come back to automatic software patching in a minute. Anything?
Yeah, hi Vishnu. My question is that as you said that RDS will take AWS will take care of all the database requirements. So could you please a little bit brief that things of what all the things that AWS will take care of that in the sense of database and all.
Probably when we create the database, then you'll understand, right? Hold on for your question, right? After we launch the database, probably that will answer your question. If not, we'll come back to the question. All right? Okay. Okay. Automatic software patching. This is one of the other things AWS is going to take care for you. Say if you have provisioned database server in house, right? So you will have to schedule the maintenance windows. You will have to flip over the database from primary to secondary, then patch your primary server again, then flip over the secondary to primary, and then patch the next server, change windows, and all of this stuff that you have to do, right? With here, all you need is you need to just schedule a window, right? All you need is to schedule a window. After that, Amazon is going to take care of patching your database during that window, whatever you're going to specify, right? And performance, they give you good storage IOPS and all of that stuff, and scalability. You can have a RDS instance up to 32 CPUs and 244 gigs of RAM. We're going to look at that. Easy storage scaling, right? So the storage database can go up to 64 TB also, right? And availability or durability. So if you have configured properly, Amazon will help you take the automated backups also, right? Automated backups, database snapshots. You can take database snapshots, and that is very useful just in case if you have any wrong transactions and if you want to go back to a point in time recovery, then snapshots will help you, right? Then you have something called as multi-AZ deployment, the one that we talked about, right? And there's something called as automatic host replacement. So what does that mean is in a multi-AZ deployment, say if this node has gone bad for some reason, right? Then Amazon will automatically create a what Amazon does is Amazon will basically switch over this master to slave. So this will become the master, and Amazon will automatically replace this master with another server, right? That all will be taken care by Amazon. Then security, all of the security standards you can have, manageability, cost effectiveness, all of this stuff is here, right? So without much further talking, right? Let's go and look at launching a RDS instance, right? Probably this will answer you some of your questions. If it doesn't, I'll be more than happy to take your questions again, right? So let's get started with it. All that you have to do is you have to click on get started now. First, you have to decide in which region you want to create your databases, right? I have switched over to North Virginia because I want to launch my database in there, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on get started now. Now, the first thing that you have to decide is what type of database that you want to use, right? As I said, there are different types of database engines that are there. Amazon Aurora, they insist AWS wants you to go for Amazon Aurora because it's their product and they say they have lots of advanced features, but it's all down to you if you think you and your company and your application that you have, if you think this suits your requirement, you can go for that. Otherwise, you can go for MariaDB or MySQL DB or Postgres or Oracle or SQL Server, right? So all of these database options are available for you. Okay. Okay. So say for example, if I'm going to choose Oracle, right? I'm going to choose Oracle and say if I'm going to choose Oracle Standard Enterprise 1 edition. Right? This is one of the editions of Oracle SC, right? Right? Oracle Standard Edition 1 is one of the type of Oracle database server. I'm not going to launch it, but I'm just going to show you a couple of steps how to do it. Right? Select, and then it's going to ask you whether you want to go for a multi-AZ deployment or no. Right? If I'm going to go for a multi-AZ deployment, the next question that it asks you is, what is the license model? Right? What is the license model that you want to use? As Oracle database is a commercial software, right? They don't give it out free for you, right? Oracle database is not free. Oracle database is not MySQL. Oracle database, if you want to use it, you have to pay it. You have to pay money for it. So it is asking you what type of license you want to use. Whether you want to go for something called as bring your own license. With this, if you're going to choose, what's going to happen is you can provision an instance. After you provision an instance, you have to enter the license key. Only then you can use your database, right? And there is another type, license included, right? If you go for something called as license included, and this license included is not available for all the versions of Oracle also, right? It is only available for standard edition 1 edition, right? Right. So, and this what's going to happen is, say you need an Oracle database server only for 2 hours, right? You just want to compare MySQL versus Oracle, for example, right? For that comparison, probably you need 2 hours or 2 days or whatever you want to, a limited period of time. But for doing that, do I have to buy the complete product? No, at least for SE1, no, right? You can go for something called as license included. So you're going to use your database and you're going to pay money for that for only 2 hours, right? So that is available only in this SE1 edition. I go back to the previous version. I go back to previous, and then there are 2 other editions, right? Oracle Enterprise Edition and Oracle Standard Edition. If I go for Standard Edition or Enterprise Edition, the only option that you have is bring your own license, right? It doesn't have an option of license included. So you can provision the database instance, but after you provision the database instance, the next thing that you have to do is you have to enter your license key for Oracle database, Standard Edition or Enterprise Edition. It's the same for both, right? It's same for both. So if you have a license key, or if you want to have a Oracle database server, select one of this. Right? Then you also have something like Microsoft SQL Server. Even it has the same license model, something like that, right? It also has bring your own license or license included. So depending on your requirement, check out the license modeling, and then you can decide what to go for, right? But for now, what we are going to do is we're going to go MySQL Server. Basically, I'm using MySQL Server because it is free to install. There is no charge for, at least there is no charge for MySQL Server, right? So for the software, I don't have to pay, right? So I'm going to select this. Then it's going to ask you whether you want to go for a multi-AZ deployment or no, right? This comes under free tier, right? This comes under free tier, and this doesn't come under free tier, but I'm going for this one. Just to show you guys how it works, I'm going for this one. Click on next step. The next question it asks you is what type of license, right? MySQL has GPL license, which basically means you can use it. You don't have to worry about the licenses. You can use it, right? You don't have to worry about it. You can choose it. And which version of Microsoft SQL Server you want to go for, right? Which version of Microsoft SQL Server? The current available version in the market is 5.6.23. Do you want to go for that, or do you want to go for 5.6.22? It's up to you. But the general practice is, for at least for the databases, always go for n-2, right? That's the best practice that people follow. I don't know why, but that's what people say, that's the best practice. So what does that mean is, don't go for the current version, go for 2 versions below the current version, right? But as is this the test database, I'm not going to do much of stuff, so I'm going with the latest version, right? And then you have to choose the instance class. Then you have to choose the instance class. Does these things look similar to you people? They should look similar to you people, because you guys would have already launched EC2 instances, right? You guys would have already launched EC2 instances. If you have launched EC2 instances, these things should look similar: t2.micro, t2.small, m3.medium, m3.large, all of this stuff, right? Sorry. If you look at these things, it should remind you of EC2 instance types, right? In a similar way to EC2 instance types, even your RDS has instance types. Okay, even your RDS has instance types. So based on your requirement, based on the hardware requirement for your database, you can choose one of these databases, right? So I need a database server, but I need 8 GB RAM for the database server, and I also need more CPUs. Then I can go for this, or even more CPUs I need. I can go for something other than that, right? Even more RAM and all of this stuff. So as you go on using more hardware, you will have to pay more money for AWS, for Amazon, right? So if you come back to the product page here, right? If you come back to the product page here, so basically it says what this product page says is the current available instance classes are all of this. Okay, the current available instance classes are all of this, and if you go for reserved instances, right, there are some reserved instances, and there are some, again here the pricing works like the same in EC2. We have talked about pricing for EC2 instances, right? We have talked about pricing for EC2 instances like on-demand instance pricing and reserved instance pricing. If you guys remember, we have talked about 3 types: on-demand, reserved, and spot instance, right? The same works here, but here there is no concept of spot instances here. Here there is only 2. One is on-demand, and another one is reserved, right? So if you look at the pricing section here, right, if you look at the pricing section here, it has all of these database types available, right? It has all of these database types available. And if you look at the on-demand pricing, right, the first thing that you can look at is the on-demand pricing. And the database pricing, the same like with EC2 instances, how it changes with the operating system, right? If you guys remember, if you go for a Windows 2012 server edition versus Amazon Linux, right? Obviously, the Windows Server instance price will be more, because that will include also the license cost, right? So, if you in a similar way, as with the operating system selection, the same applies here. If you're going for Oracle server or a Microsoft SQL server, the charges will be more, right? The charges will be more. And if you go for Aurora or MySQL, generally the charges will be lesser. And the pricing also varies depending on the region that you're going to choose, right? You guys remember, California is expensive, Sydney is expensive, right? Comparatively to North Virginia. Okay. Say for example, let's stick to an example. Let's stick to an example of MySQL, right? MySQL. and this is all for single AZ deployment. The prices that you are looking at here is single AZ deployment, right? When you decide to go for a multi-AZ deployment, just double up the price. Whatever is being shown here, just double up the price, and that is your multi-AZ deployment pricing, right? So, for example, if I look at an M3.X large, right, an M3.X large for a MySQL, an M3.X large for MySQL in North Virginia is how much? How much is it? 37 cents, right? If I go for SQL Server, I don't have that one, but normally it will be more than that, right? M3.X large, if I look at it, right? I look at it, it is 84 cents because it is micro. They will also have to pay licenses charge for it, and this is license included model, right? This is license included model. Okay, so based on your requirement, you can go for the edition that you want, and the price of the instance will vary depending on uh, three things: the engine that you're going for, and the location, right, and the size of the instance. Okay, so if you look at, let's keep talking about MySQL Server itself, right? So MySQL Server normally costs you how much? 37 cents, right? This is for an on-demand instance, but you can also go for, like, if you guys remember, we have talked about reserved instance pricing also, right? All right, so before that, let's look at the multi-AZ deployment pricing, right? So same DB M3.X large will cost you 74 cents, which is nothing but double the price of this one. It was 37 cents. If you double that, then you get 74 cents. So multi-AZ deployment is double of single AZ deployment. Okay. Then you can also go for reserved instance pricing. Okay. If you are with as in the case with EC2 instances, if you go for reserved instances pricing, you're going to get discounts, right? You guys remember, you're going to get discounts. The same thing if I look at M3.large or M3.X large, right? So there are two models here, right? One is one year term, right? The reserved instance pricing. If you know that you're going to use a database server, MySQL database server for next 1 year, you should go for 1 year term. If you are sure that you're going to use the database for next 3 years, you should go for a 3 year term, right? If you go for a 3 year term, and if you're going to go with all upfront payment, that means you're going to pay all the money for the next 3 years now. Then AWS is going to give you a discount of 60%. That's a huge discount, right? It's less than half the price. So you should know what is appropriate for you, and you should make a call, right? All right. So these are all the pricing models that are there, and here you get an option to choose what type of database what type of instance class that you want to use, right? So for now, we'll go with a T2.micro. If you need a bigger instance, you can definitely go for a bigger instance. But for now, we are going to go with a T2.micro instance. And do you want to go for a multi-AZ deployment? Yes or no? You can choose. I'm going to say yes. So I'm going to do a multi-AZ deployment. And what should be the storage type? If you guys remember, while provisioning the EBS volume, you have an option to go with provisioned IOPS or general purpose SSD or magnetic, right? The same is here, right? If you want to go for a specific number of IOPS, if you know how many IOPS you need, you can go for that. But for now, we'll go with the general purpose SSD, right? And the minimum storage that you can do is 5 GB, right? And the maximum that you can go for us especially with general purpose SSD, it's 6 TB, right? And with this one, if you go for, even this is 6 TB. Even if you're going for a provisioned IOPS, also it's 6 TB, or a general purpose SSD, also it's 6 TB. Max is 6 TB, and the minimum is 5 GB. I think if you're going for a provisioned IOPS, the minimum is 100 GB, I guess, right? If you're going for a If you're going for a provision IOPS, the minimum database size should be 100 GB, right? For now, we'll go with the general purpose SSD, and we are going to go with 5 GB. Okay. And what should be your database identifier name? These are all the details of the database that we are going to create, right? So I'll say MySQL DB1, right? Anything that makes sense to you, you can give my user, and it is test1234. So I've selected a username to log into my database, and I also selected a password. Then click on next step. Okay, so which VPC that you're going to launch in? For now, we are going to go over the default VPC, which subnet group you leave that default, and whether you want to access this database publicly, right? Because we don't have many servers in AWS, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to access our database server publicly. So I'm going to say publicly accessible, yes. And if you have a specific, if you have a requirement for specific availability zone, you can choose the availability zone. But now I'm not going to do it, right? If you already have a security group to have this database instance placed in, you can choose the security group, or you can go for a new security group, right? I don't have a security group anything as such, right? So I'm going to go with a new security group for now. And when it creates a database, right? So what should it create? Under your, it will have to create a test database, right? I'll say MySQL DB2, right? Something like this. Any whatever makes sense you can give. And the port on which your server is going to operate, right? All the communication in the network happens only on port numbers, right? So the default port number for MySQL server is 3306. That's the default port number. If you guys don't want it, if you guys want a different port number for your database, you can definitely go for that. All you have to do is you have to type in here. And there are two parameter groups, right? There are two ways you can configure your database. There is something called as parameter group, and there is something called as option group. Okay. We're going to look at that shortly, right? These are some of the tunings that you can do for your database, right? And if you want to enable encryption for the data that you're storing, you can choose that. But with A2.micro, that is not available. If you go for a bigger instances, you can go for that. We're not going to do that. And backup. Okay. So once you create a database, right? Once you create a database, you also want to have a backup of your database, right? So normally you would do the backup for your instances. Normally, if you're a database administrator for an organization, your database administrator will have to schedule the backups for your database. But here, all you have to do is you have to select the date, the backup retention period. What does that mean is after you take a backup, how long you want to store that backup. After you create the backup, how long you want to store the backup. All you have to do is that setting, that's it, right? So how long you want to store the backup? Say for example, I want to store it for 7 days, the default value that I'm going for. And when should the backup happen? When should the backup happen? That is, say if you have a single AZ database instance, right? If you have a single AZ database instance, you don't want to take the backups during the daytime, right? Say you're working for an organization and they have some transactions happening during the day, and even if you schedule your backup also during the day, obviously your database is going to get slowed down, right? If you want to avoid that, obviously you want to avoid that. Choose a correct backup window, right? Choose a correct backup window based on your requirement. You can choose it. But if you're going for multi-AZ deployment, right? This doesn't matter much. Backup window, the backup window and performance doesn't matter much. So what's going to happen is your primary database will be here. Backup will happen on the secondary database, right? So your primary database is not touched. So the performance drop will be very low, right? The performance drop will be very, very less. In fact, it will be negligible. Okay. So if you're going for a multi-AZ deployment, this doesn't matter much, the window, but if you're going for a single AZ deployment, this does matter a lot, right? You should always make sure that you don't take backups of your database during your business hours. And if you schedule a backup during your business hours, that will slow up everything. Okay, you don't want to do that basically. So depending on your requirement, you can go for either no preference, or you want to. So if you know the time where if you want to restrict your, if you know a time window for your database backup, you can choose a time, right? But for now, I'm going with the no preference. Any time is fine with me, right? And then you have something called as maintenance, auto minor version upgrade, right? So whenever there are minor versions released for the database software, whether you want it to be upgraded, yes or no, right? If we select yes, it will be automatically upgraded. And again, the maintenance window, right? During which window your database should be patched. Okay. Again, the same concept, same applies here. If you go for a multi-AZ deployment, what's going to happen is your secondary database will be patched first, right? Then this will switch over from your master to secondary or standby, and then your master will be patched. And once after this is after the master is patched and even this standby is patched, again the switchover happens to master. So there will be no difference. There will be no significant impact on your database, right? So you'll have to select that. And again, for this, you have an option to choose the maintenance window, right? Again, this is very important. If you have a single AZ deployment of your RDS, because during that time, will not be your database will be down, and if they have to patch it, they'll have to take your database down, right? So you'll have to be very careful with that, like your backup window. Even this has an impact on performance. So you want to be doubly careful when you want to do that, and you want to be doubly sure when you want to do that. Okay. So based on your requirement, you can choose if you have a specific window or any specific window or time, you can choose that. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for no preference. That is, any time is fine with me. So I'm going to click on launch DB instance. Okay. So what it is doing is it is creating a database instance for me, right? All right. So let's come back to Nikhil's question. Nikhil?
Yeah, Vishnu.
Did the process help you understand what all AWS does?
Yeah, I'll be able to understand a little bit about this AWS and RDS synchronization.
Right.
So we can create our instances and we allocate the space and all these things we can do.
Right. But you had a question, right? What AWS
Yeah, I had a
does?
question.
Yeah, does this answer your question already, or?
Frankly speaking, Vishnu, I'm having a lot of confusion on that, and I'm not clear. I need to once again go through this slide as well. Okay.
Okay. So what AWS does for you is, say, so now what you're getting is a directly MySQL server, right? MySQL server on top of it, t2.micro instance. But if you don't go for RDS, you will have to install MySQL server, right? You'll have to install the MySQL server software. Then if you want a secondary database also, then you have to establish that sync between your primary and secondary database, right? Then say if you want to back up your database, so you will have to schedule your backups. Then say if you want to update the database, even you will have to schedule that. But here, everything will be taken care by AWS. So that is the ease that you get with RDS, right? Lot of things will be done by AWS.
Okay. Vishnu, I have one more question. In case while configuring the instances, EC2 instances, if I choose the window instances with the this one MySQL or the any other database package, so in that case, I need to also synchronize with the RDS, or at that time it works automatically.
If you are installing MySQL server on a EC2 instance, that is nowhere related to RDS.
Okay.
That is separately a separate entity altogether. That is just like another EC2 instance.
Okay. Actually, I'm getting confused over here. That's why I'm not.
That's a
Not
completely
okay.
different thing altogether.
Okay.
If you decide to install database on an EC2 instance, it's no longer
Mm-hmm.
RDS. It's your EC2 instance working running some software. One of the software could
Okay.
be one of the database engines. If you're
Okay.
going for RDS, and another interesting thing with these RDS instances is you'll not be able to log into the machine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Once after I launch the instance, you cannot log into that RDS instance. All you can do is you can connect to the database. If I have a database installed, logging into the operating system is a different thing. Logging into the database is a different thing, right? They are two different things. After I launch the RDS instance, all I can do is I can connect to my database instance, but I cannot log into the underlying operating system, right? So that operating system will be completely maintained by AWS. So you will not be able to log into the database also.
Okay. So
Okay.
that means that for making any further modifications in the database, I don't need to log in over the
No,
particular machine
no.
or any
If
particular
you
region.
hold on, if you want to make modifications in the database, you can make it. But if you want to make modifications in the operating system on which this RDS is running, you cannot make it,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Fine.
Making modifications to RDS database is different. Making modifications to operating system is different, right? So if you want to make any modifications to the database, you should be able to do it because it is your database. But if you want to make any modifications in the operating system on which this database is running, you will not be able to do it.
Okay. Vishnu, I have one more question. Can we share the single database with the multiple regions as well?
What do you mean by multiple regions?
Like no, right now we are in North Virginia, South Virginia, or something like that, and other
Right,
California. And
right.
can we share the single database with these multiple locations, regions
Yes,
as well?
yes, we can do it. I will talk about that shortly.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So my database is getting created. We might have to give it a couple of minutes for it to get created. I can look at the logs as to what's happening. These are the current logs. So it is creating it. So it's still creating it. So normally it does take a bit of time because we are going for a multi-AZ deployment, right? So it has created the database, right? And and it is modifying some parameters on top of it. And if you look at it, I got this endpoint, right? So what does this endpoint means is this is the link that you should use to connect your database, right? If you want to connect your database, obviously you will need an address, right? IP address or something like that. Here, what you will get is this one, right? So, so let me quickly launch a EC2 instance so that I can show you how to connect to a database from a EC2 instance also. I guess I can use one of these instances. I can power on this instance instead of creating a new instance. I'll use this instance to start the instance. And now if I refresh my CloudWatch, not yet, but when after this database instance is launched, if I do a refresh, probably I have to change the region, right? So if I change the region and now click at it, you have metrics for RDS, right? After you launch your database, you will get metrics for RDS. We'll look at that again. We'll come back to it again. But now I have my EC2 instance getting launched. So let me connect to my EC2 instance. all these database operations do take time, so we'll have to keep waiting for things to happen. This is such right. We should be able to connect to it. And if you are looking at it, it's doing something on your database. It is basically modifying. So after it modifies, then we'll be able to connect to it. I'm just connecting to a EC2 instance to show you how to connect to a MySQL server. I think there is something wrong here, so I'll edit this. I haven't allowed SSH from MP, but my IP would have changed by now. So doing this. EC2 closer. Right, so I logged into my instance. Okay, this is my EC2 instance. From this EC2 instance, I'm going to connect to the database. But to connect to this instance, I need MySQL client. Right, so all I have is what I'm doing is I'm launching a MySQL server. But to connect to MySQL server, I'll need a MySQL client. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install MySQL client by this command. Right, if I do this command, it's going to install MySQL. It'll install MySQL client. It's taking longer than usual. So okay. So what it basically does is it will also take a backup after it creates an initial database. Right. So that is what it is doing now. If you go into events, right, it will basically show you what all it is doing. It has created the database, right? It has created the database. And then it has applied all the modifications to make it a multi-AZ database. Right? That's the reason we were saying modifying. Right? After that, it will also very shortly it will also show up an event for backing up. Right? And before this is getting launched, let's quickly look at something called as reserved purchases. So if you want to, we talked about reserved instances, right? Reserved DB2 instances. If you want to have a reserved DB instance, you can come into this reserved purchases, click on purchase a reserved database instance, and then again it's like what type of database that you want to go for. You will see BYOL. So what does that mean is bring your own license. LI is license included, right? Based on your requirement, you can either go for BYOL or license included, right? I'm going to go for a MySQL server. Then the database instance class, I'm going to choose this. Then if you want to multi deployment or no, I'm going to say yes. How long, right? Offering type. If I'm going to go for all upfront payment, right? If you want to give a database ID, you can give. And saying if I'm going for a M3.x large instance in North Virginia, doing on all upfront payment, I'll have to pay this much. Okay, so I'll have to pay this much. Now I have to click continue and my database will be ready, and all I have to do a payment of this much. Okay, so that is how you purchase a reserved instance, reserved DB instance. But we are not going to do that. I'm just showing you that. Let's go back to our screen, and now it says available. That means it is ready. Database has been deployed, multi-AZ settings has been done, everything is ready. Now it is ready to accept data, right? If we go back to events, that's what it shows, right? It has also backed up the initial copy of your database, right? The same thing you can see it over here also. Alarms and events will show up here as well. Now let's connect to this database. So you're going to connect to it, MySQL. Minus my user was that minus b. No. It doesn't take so long normally. So let's try it again. What's wrong with that? Why is it taking so long? Minus a host name. That's right, and minus the username. That's right. Normally it doesn't take so long, but somehow it's taking way too long. This is the user that we created, right? My user is a username. That's right. So what's wrong with that? Something seems to be wrong with the database. Probably we'll have to restart it because it doesn't take so long normally. I can even connect to this database from here. This is called as a Microsoft SQL Workbench. MySQL Workbench. Want to connect to a database? Just come here, give an IP address of the database server that you want to connect, right? And the port is the default 3306, and the user. Okay. I'm going to ask you for the password. Just want to please password that I have set. somehow this seems to be working fine. If I say select databases, right? Sorry, show databases. Show databases. If I'm going to do this, and if I'm going to run it, right? It basically says these are all the databases that are there, right? If you look at this, this is one of the databases that we created. I don't know why it is not able to connect from the EC2 instance. Probably I'll have to look at that. But if you look at it, I'm able to connect to my database. Right? This is the database that we created. Right? If you look at that, this is the database that we have created. All I have to do now is I have to use this. All I did was I've used this link, right? Now I'm able to access a MySQL server. If you want to do further stuff on it, you can do, right? I can say use MySQL db2, right? If I do this, db2 again, right? I can also say show tables, right? If you have any tables created, it will show you the table, but I don't have any tables as such, so that will not come, that will return nothing, right? Basically it has no tables in it. Okay, so if you know how to create a database, how to create tables, how to store data, you can very well do it, right? But we're not going to do that. We're not here to learn databases, so we're not going to do that. But I just want to show you how to connect to the database, and that's what we have done here. Okay. Can't connect, something strange. Okay, I don't want to debug that problem. No, all you have probably, I think it's a problem with the security groups, but I don't want to get into that one now. So I'll not get into that one. But this is how you connect to a database, right? So say if you have an application, all you do is you mention this database server address in the application, and then your application will connect to this database server, right? So there are a couple of interesting things that you want to notice here, right? So there are three buttons here. The first one will basically is for the monitoring. You'll have alarms and recent events that are happening in a database, and then there is another window here which has basically monitors. Means these are all the metrics, these are all the CloudWatch monitors that we have, right? And if you look at it, the current CPU usage is very less, the memory usage, the storage usage, out of the 500 MB, 5 GB that we are currently using very less, and the current value that is 4550 MB, right? And there are no read IOPS and all of this stuff. And there are some interesting details here. If you click on this one, right, this is for monitoring. This is basically give you the details. Right, if you look at it, it will also say you what type of database engine that you have used. We have used a MySQL database, and the license model, when was it created, what is the default DB name that we launched inside the database. That is what is here, right? This is what is the database that's created after it launched the MySQL instance. Then the user, then the parameter group, and all of this stuff. And where is this database currently? It is in USS 1B, right? And subnet groups and all of these things is pretty normal. This is a security group behind which this database server is, and it is publicly accessible, and the endpoint is this, right? Endpoint is very important. For an RDS instance, the only way that you can connect to the RDS instance is to the endpoint, right? And this is the endpoint, right? And it's going to use port 3306 by default, and the current instance type is T2.micro. And it's a general purpose SSD and IOPS and all of this information. Encryption is disabled, right? And it also says multi-AZ is enabled, right? And the secondary zone, right? And the secondary zone is US East 1E. So my primary database or my main database is in US East 1B, and my secondary database is in US East 1E. Okay, and I have enabled automated backups, and it has automatically it will automatically choose a backup window for you, right? And the window that it has chosen for automatic backups is this, right? and for automatic maintenance is this, because we did not specify anything as such, right? So those are the information that is available there. And then you have another interesting tab here. Say I have, say, let's come back to this. Okay, say I have one database server here somewhere, right? I have one database server somewhere, and there are say if these are my application servers, right? And there is a lot of traffic that is coming in from my application servers to database server, right? I have one database server. There are a lot of reads and there are a lot of writes. There are basically two operations in database, right? Read operations and write operations. There are a lot of read operations that are happening on my database, and a lot of write operations are also happening on my database. My database is getting overloaded, right? So one of the solution that you have with regards to databases to create read replicas, right? So I can have different read replicas. So what's going to happen is there'll be one database which can do read and write, right? Which can do both read and write, but I'll have some secondary database also, read replicas also. These databases will not be able to write anything. These databases will only be able to allow the applications to read, so that the traffic on your primary database server will come down, right? Say for example, in any database, the most transactions that you do are read. The general scenario is like almost you do 100 reads, almost you do like 90 reads and 10 writes, right? So if you can reduce, if you can split that 90 reads traffic to across to multiple servers, obviously the load will come down on this main server, right? So if you want to go for something like that, you can create something called as read replica. Currently what it is saying is I don't have any read replica, but if I want to have a read replica, I can go for it, I can create it, right? All I have to do is I have to click on here, create read replica, right? We're going to do that now. If I'm going to click on create read replica is almost the same as your another RDS instance. The only difference is it will not be able to do any write transactions, but the costing and everything else is same, right? Everything else is same. You can choose. You can also choose. Coming back to Nikhil's question here, say if you want to have the database in a different location, a different region, right? I want to have my primary database server in US, and I also want to have a read replica in Sydney. I can do that, right? I can do that. I can go for a different regions, right? My primary is in US North Virginia. Then I'm going to have my read replica in Oregon, right? Then if you want have any subnet groups, you can select that, but I'm not going to do that anything as such. And whether it's publicly accessible, yes. Availability zone, if you have any preference, you can choose. You have to give a database identifier through which you're going to identify the database, right? Say I'll say my SQL RR read replica for me, right? MySQL RR, MySQL PP1 RR. So that indicates that's a read replica for me. If you want to do a minor version upgrade, yes or no. If you want to select yes or no, depending, it's up to your choice. And there'll be no need for backing up of your read replicas, right? Because the database will be primary. You can back up from your primary database, and there are no transactions happening on the read replicas. So there is no need for doing a read replica backup. That is the reason you don't see anything here for read replica. Now if I'm going to click on create read replica, right? Now again we'll have to wait for some time. What it will do is you'll see that it will create a read replica. Again we'll have to wait for some time. Looking at the events, right? Has finished the database instance and all of that stuff. Let's basically it has to create a read replica, so that's taking time. And now if you look at the replication role, it says master, right? Because now this is what we have is a master database. Now we are going to have a read replica database also shortly. But instead of waiting that, we can have a quick look at your RDS metrics also for your database, right? So you have different RDS metrics, like you have so many metrics, right? You have so many metrics like disk usage, what is the I/O latency, how much is the free memory, how much is the storage space, how much is the CPU usage. All of these things can be monitored, right? As with any other alarms, you can choose a metric, click on create alarm, and you can create an alarm, right? So if you want to do anything across all of your database servers, you can monitor also, right? So there are different metrics available for your RDS instances. Based on your requirement, you can create alarms, right? So it is. So before making it a read replica, it's going to take a backup, right? It's taking a backup now. After it does a backup, then it's going to create a read replica, right? So what else you can do with your instances? You can say, I think I'll have to wait before I show you that. I think I'll have to wait. So it has finished the backup, then it's going to create a read replica, right? It has again taken a backup, then it is done. Now it is creating a read replica. We'll give it a couple of minutes. Right. So this read replica is done. And if you guys remember, if I look at this, right, it says there is a read replica. And primary database is in here in North Virginia, and my secondary database is in, or the secondary database or the read replica is in Oregon, right? So let's look at Oregon console. I'll change my region to Oregon. Now if I go into my RDS, right, it says I have one database instance, right? It says it is still creating it, right? It is still creating it, but I have a database instance in Oregon, right? This I haven't created it manually. It is basically creating it from the database server what we have, okay? And it says read replica source. If you look at it carefully, it says read replica sources MySQL DB1 North Virginia, right? It is creating that. It will create nothing much to do there, but this is how you create a read replica of your database, okay? Okay. So if you just click on, if you don't want to see monitoring, you can escape that. But let's, if you want to see monitoring, then it's going to show up here. If you want to select the EC2 instance, right? It's good. These are all the basic metrics that are there for your database, right? All I did was I clicked on show monitoring and I've selected the database that I have. So it basically says you what all the metrics that you have available. These are all the monitoring metrics that you have. If you want to select an alarm, if you want to create any alarm, you can create it. But I don't want to go into monitoring as such, monitoring stuff for now. So what else you can do is you can create another read replica in another region, or once you have a read replica done, we'll wait for this read replica to be complete. After you have a read replica created, and if it is working fine, then what you can do is say, then you can promote your read replica also. So what after you promote your read replica, what's going to happen is that read replica will become an independent database server, right? That read replica will become an independent database server, and it will no longer sync with your primary database server, right? Then it will no longer sync with the master, right? Say for example, if you want to copy one database server from one region to another region, so the thing that you can do is you can create a read replica, then make sure that all the data is replicated. Then you can break the replication by promoting the read replica to be a master server. And that way you can copy your database instance from one region to another region. Right? Probably it's going to take some time, but whenever it does, all you can do is you can click on this database instance and come into instance actions and make it as a you can promote your read replica to be a primary database server. Okay, that you can do. Okay, other than that, what else you can do is you can take a snapshot, right? I hope you guys understand what snapshot is. We have also looked at snapshots of the data of the disk also, right? So database snapshots also work in similar to that. So if I take a snapshot, I can take a snapshot, right? Say all you have to give is some name, snap1 or something like that. Right now it is creating a snapshot. It's creating a snapshot. Basically, it's going to back up your database and create a snapshot. Right. So initially, this was the initial snapshot when it was created. Right. Then I think this snapshot was for making a read replica. I guess whenever it says doing a backup, what it is actually doing is it is creating a snapshot. Okay. Go back to my instances. It'll show it as backing up. So what does that mean? Is it is creating a snapshot of your instance now. Okay. So what else you can do? You can say if you have snapshots, and if you want to roll back your changes from today to say probably yesterday, right? Say that there are some bad entries have come into my database, and I want to go back to my database how it was 2 days back, right? Then I can do a restore point in time. Then I can specify. What time I want to restore, right? Exact time I can do that, and I can also say, so what it is basically going to do is it's going to create another RDS instance for you, right? And that RDS instance will have copy of that snapshot that you have taken, right? Copy of whatever details were like that on at this time, right? It is the same thing that you have to do. All you have to do is you have to click launch DB instance. It's going to create another DB instance with the content of this database instance at this time. Okay, so that you can do. You can uh, you can restore to a point in time. You can also migrate to a latest snapshot. So what's going to happen is, again, it's the same thing, right? It's going to migrate to a latest snapshot, right? If you want to do that, we don't want to do that either. So let's wait. Let's see if the backup is completed. Backup is not completed yet, right? So it's still backing up. The meanwhile, it's creating. It is still creating it. Okay. So let's give it a couple of minutes. Okay, now it is back in available state, right? So what else you can do? You can modify, right? So what does that mean is, say for example, I've launched a t2.micro instance, right? I've launched a t2.micro instance that will have 1 CPU and 1 GB RAM, but that is not good enough for me. I need more CPU, I need more RAM, and I have launched only 5 GB storage. That is not good enough. I need more space to store the database. Right? Then what I can do is I can choose a, say for example, I'm modifying allocated storage, right? And depending on what all other parameters that you want to modify, you can modify it. If I'm not going to click this button, right? If I'm not going to click this button, if I'm going to click on simply continue, right? So what's going to happen is whenever your next maintenance window is, right? Whenever your next maintenance window is, only during that time your changes will be applied. Right now nothing is happening. Even I have chosen the things that it has to upgrade the storage, right? It's not happening because my current maintenance window is during this time, Saturday 7:58 to 8:28. During this hour, during this half an hour time, so whatever the changes that you make are going to happen. If I don't check this button, if I'm going to check this button and if I'm going to do it, it's going to happen immediately, but I don't want to do that because it's going to stop the database. It's going to again create a database and create the backup and all. It's going to take some time. I don't want to do that for now. But if the important thing is, if you don't click this, the changes are not going to happen on the fly, right? So what else you can do? You can reboot your database instance, right? If you want to reboot your database instance, you can reboot your database instance. If you want to delete it, you can delete it. If you think you no longer need the database, right? If you just want to delete it, click on delete, right? And it will ask you before deleting it whether you want to take a final snapshot, right? So if you delete the database now and if you don't take a snapshot, and tomorrow if you come back and you see and you think that you have some important data that has to be retrieved from the database that you have deleted, you will not be able to do it unless you take a final snapshot, right? I don't want to delete the database yet. Somebody has a question. Let's take the question. Yeah, Kunal. Kunal, I see your hand raised, but I can't hear you. You have muted yourself, Kunal. If you have a question, you have to unmute yourself. Now I think you can. Yeah, Kunal. I can't hear you. Can you type your question? Okay. Okay. No problem. He did not have any question. He just by mistakenly raised his hand. That's fine. No problem. Right? So those are all the things that you can do with your database. You can delete it at the end if you don't want it. As I said, you can go for reserved instances if you need it. Then you have something called as snapshots, right? With a snapshot, you can say, I want to have taken a backup. I want to restore the snapshot, right? I can create a new database from this snapshot, right? I can create a new database from this snapshot. If I want, I can do that. It's going to create a new database, right? Again, you get an option to choose whether you're going to go for multi-age deployment or no. I'm not going to go for that. I'm going for general purpose SSD, and I'm going to say this database as snapdb, right? Anything that makes sense to you. If I'm going to say restore database instance. See, it's creating a new database, right? If I look at my instances, after I tried restoring the snapshot, it's creating a new database instance. Okay, that is how the snapshot restores work. If you want to move the snapshot from one region to another region, right? If you want to move the snapshot from one region to another region, you can move that. All you have to do is you have to click on, this migrate snapshot is to migrate your database engine from one database engine to another database engine, right? Say if you have a MySQL server, currently you have a MySQL server, you want to migrate to Aurora, right? You can do that. All you have to do is choose migrate database, and currently you can migrate MySQL to Aurora, so that's the reason it is locked here. Okay, that's the only migration that you can do. Then if you want to copy a snapshot from one region to another region, you can do it, right? Where do you want to copy the snapshot? So I want to copy it to Sydney, and what's going to be the name of the snapshot there? I click on copy. The snapshot is going to be copied, but I'm not going to do that now. But that is something you can do. And if you don't think you need the snapshot, you can delete the snapshot. So I don't need this snapshot. And this. These are the automatically created snapshots, so you will not be able to delete it. But if you have taken any snapshots, if you want to delete it, you can delete it. This snapshot, I can delete it. I'm just worried about my instance that is coming online, right? So I don't want to delete this snapshot. I think I can delete this snapshot. And if I don't want this snapshot, then I can delete the snapshot. But it says currently being used to restore the database, so it is not going to do it. But whenever this database comes into the normal state, you can go ahead and delete this snapshot. Okay. Then you have security groups. These are no longer applicable for us. For all the new accounts, it's no longer applicable. Right. Okay. All right. Security groups is not applicable. Then you have something called as parameter groups and option groups, and we'll come back to that. Then you have something called as events, right? So whenever something is happening on your databases, all the information is logged here. All the information is logged in events. And if you want to be notified by email, say your database is being backed up, or your database is being upgraded, or your database is down, or something is happening like that. Some database event is happening, and you want to be notified about it. I've scheduled automatic backups. But some days backup goes through, and some days backup doesn't go through. But I want to know when the backup is going fine and when is the backup failing, right? I can create something called as an event subscription. Just give it name something, MyDB events, right? And send notifications to which SNS topic. If you remember SNS, we have created a topic there. Choose the topic that where you want to send emails to, and what is the source, right? So what do you want to monitor? You want to monitor our instance? Yes, I want to monitor the instance. And for what all topics, right? What all event categories. So what does that mean is, say whenever there is a low storage, I want to get notified. But what all databases? Now if I look at it, I have two databases, a SnapDB and a MySQL DB. Right? If I want to be notified only for this event, only for these two servers. If I have say, a bunch of servers here, I'm not worried about all of those servers. Only this server, I'm worried about it. And whenever there is a low storage on SnapDB, send an alarm to a notification group, a particular notification group. I can choose that, or I can select all. So what's going to happen is whenever one of these operations are happening on your database, an email will be sent. I'm going to click on create. It's going to create. In a similar way, you can say you want to be notified about snapshots, right? Snapshot creation, deletion, restoration. You want to be notified about it on what all snapshots. You can choose it, and then it's going to notify you based on the snapshots. Okay. Then I'm going to come back to short. Sorry, I'm going to come back to database. It's still creating. It's taking way too long today, right? And if you look at this database in Oregon, it is created and it is available. But only difference being, if you look at this section, right, it says read replica source MySQL DB1 North Virginia, and current status is replicating. So what does that mean is it is a uh, it is only a it is only a read replica. It cannot take any write requests. It can only do reads. It cannot do any writes. Okay. Okay. So if I even this is creating. If I look at my events, right? So these are all the events are there, and you can configure alarms like this, configure notifications like this. There are different types of notification types, source types. If there is a security group change, right? If there is a parameter group change, you want to be notified about it, it can do that. Okay. If you go for a multi-AZ deployment, right, and if there is a failover, event, even though you may not see any impact, but you want to get notified about it, then you can choose. Okay, then it will let you know if there is a failover happening. So that the events, that the event subscriptions, right? Subnet groups are basically to select under what all subnets you want your databases to be launched. Before launching a database instance, before launching an RDS instance, you need to have a subnet group. So that's the reason it's automatically going to create a subnet group for you, right? It's automatically going to create a subnet. We haven't created this subnet group, but it's going to create a subnet group for you, and it's going to select all the availability zones also, right? Don't worry about this stuff much. It's not important at this moment. I'm not going to get into that. Then there is something called as security groups, which is not relevant to us at this moment, so we can ignore that. Then you have something called as parameter groups, right? Parameter groups and option groups. You look at your parameter groups. So whenever you launch a database instance, right, by default it will launch its own parameter group, right? If I want to make any changes in this parameter group, basically these two things contain certain configurations which you can apply to your database to make your, say, to improve the performance or to configure something, right? There are some default configurations. What you can do is you can uh, you can apply new parameters to your database. If I look at my instance, if I look at my current instance, it has a currently it has a default MySQL 5.6 both, right? So what I'm going to do is I want to make some changes in it, right? And what I have to do is I have to select this one, and I'm going to click create, say, my param group. Create. So it has created a new parameter group. You cannot modify any parameters under this, right? If you want to modify any parameters, you can modify from here, right? And if you want to compare the parameters from a default one to a new one you created, there are no differences as such. But if you want to modify parameters under this, you can modify. So what you can do is you can click on edit parameters, right? So these are all the different configurable options that you have in your database, right? For your databases, if you understand this, I mean, if you're a database administrator, you will definitely understand this. But if you're not a database administrator, that's fine. Just think of these are settings, right? So these are the settings that will change the behavior of your database, right? I'm just trying to find a setting which I can. Okay, so if you look at this setting, right, by default it's going to use this setting, right? It's going to create a file and it's going to uh, create a PID file, right? If you want to change that, or if you want to say change the buffer size, right? If you want to change the buffer size, or if you want to change the connection size, connection limit, all of these things you can modify here. This is the place where you modify all of those settings, right? All right, so these are all the some of the parameter options you have. Okay. Okay, so these are all the parameter groups that I have. And say if imagining you have modified some parameters and you have changed it, right? So let's make a change to a parameter. Let's save it. Go back to my parameters group. If I'm going to choose this, and if I'm going to edit the parameters, say I'll pick a random I'll pick a random parameter. Right, I'm going to pick up this parameter. I'm going to set the maximum value here. And this is the change that I have made to my this parameter. And now I want to apply this parameter to my database, because obviously I have made a configuration change in the parameter group. And now if I want to look at compare these two, I can click on compare and it's going to show me what is changed, right? What is a change in both of the parameter groups. Now if I want to apply this parameter group onto my instance, all I have to do is I have to click on this one and click on instance action, modify. Under this, you have a option to change your parameter group, right? Again, same thing. If you want to apply it immediately, click on this or click on continue. So whenever the next maintenance window is, during that time, your parameter group will be applied. If it is something which needs a maintenance window, it will be applied during that time. Or if it is something that can be applied on the fly, it will be applied. Like in this case, it is being applied now. Okay, it may not be applied now, I guess. If only during the maintenance window it's going to apply, right? In a similar way, you have something called as an options group. The same thing, right? Say MySQL new op group. Let me say this. Right, if I'm going to create it, now I have a new option group also. Now if I want to, by default there will be some options, right? If I want to add an option, right? Like these are more advanced settings, right? If you want to have memcached support, and if you want to go for some chunk size or backup protocol or binding protocol or any of these parameters, if you want to do that, you can do it. Or if you want to change it, you can do it, right? By default chunk size is 48. I don't want that. I want 40 as my chunk size, right? If I'm going to do that, and if I'm going to say add option, it has a new option inside this, right? I have tuned it. I've tuned it maybe according to my requirement. If I want to delete it, I can delete it. And now if I want to apply this to my database, again the same thing. And if you look at this parameter group that I have applied, it says it has applied, but to bring the changes into effect, it has to go for a reboot. And the reboot will only happen during the maintenance window that I have scheduled. Right? Now if I want to apply that change, apply a different parameter group, apply a different option group, I can do that. Right? And if I'm going to click on continue, it's going to happen, right? Because I mentioned that apply immediately, and I have maintenance windows here, so it's not happening. But that is how you modify your parameter groups and option groups. Okay, so that's pretty much I have in RDS. If you guys have any questions, I'll be able to take questions. If you don't have any questions, I think we can call it a day. So it's just 15 minutes left. If anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand. I'll be able to take questions now. Okay. Bhavik, do you have any questions there? Okay, all right. So I guess no questions. I'm fine with that. All right, guys. I'll talk to you next week, next Saturday. All right. Talk to you guys later.